All right. Here's that awkward moment of truth, everybody, where I have to wait for the internets to wake up because there's no on site producer. So I have to see it to believe it. And I have to say, YouTube, are you awake? YouTube is slowly waking up. Where is Rockfin? Twitter's always first, by the way. This is always the race for second. YouTube beat Rockfin by a little bit. I prefer it when it's the other way around. And I've been asking if you guys care about this stuff. Some of you have said, Ron, we do care. We are curious who comes in first. Well, Twitter always comes in first. Twitter always wakes up the quickest. But then who comes in second? Is it going to be YouTube? Is it going to be Rockfin? And it's neck and neck quite often. But today, YouTube, beat Rockfin by a little bit. What's up, everybody? Good afternoon, good evening, good morning if you're in my time zone, the Pacific time zone. And hello to everyone in the future, Australia, New Zealand. Thanks for waking up early. Thanks for hanging out. And of course, everybody checking out the podcast later. Whatever your circumstance is, I hope it's going great. Shout out to everyone who makes this show possible. Our friends over at Indie Left. Indie Left is a place to find all the content creators and streamers you know and love. What they do is they curate a list of all kinds of different content. They update it twice a day, so it's a nice one-stop shop to get a lot of the different news and perspectives going on out there. So check them out, and to learn more and subscribe to their Discord, check out their website at independentleft.media. All right, this is the early week Get Your News On with Ron show, which means I interview a guest. It's the guest portion, and I'm really excited to talk to this person. So she is a musician. She is a veteran. She is an activist. She is a protester who has been beaten by police and even shot at, I believe, rubber bullets, but we're going to get all the details, by police as well. She has a new single out called It's All Right to Not Be Okay. And another fun thing about her, she is the co-host of one of my favorite podcasts. It's a podcast called What the Folk. I've been on it before. If you haven't checked it out, you really should. It is one of my favorite podcasts to listen to. So without further ado, please welcome to the show, Joy Damiani. Joy, what's up?
Hi, what's up? So good to be here.
I also said that this is on my show this week. It is the week of joy because you are my guest today. And then one of the people who regularly goes through the headline show with me is a girl named Joy. Savage Joy is her nickname. So her name is also Joy. So it's the week of joy. It's only joys are allowed on the show this week.
Fantastic. Well, and according to one of my favorite new authors, Carla Bergman, and co-authored by Nick Montgomery, their book Joyful Militancy has reminded me this past year, that joy embodies all emotions. So here's to being joy and everything else at the same time.
What's that book about? You've gotten my curiosity.
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad. I've been recommending it to everybody because it's Joyful Militancy. It's really sort of a look at, the way we approach radicalism and the way we approach militancy from this very rigid place and this very perfection and idealism seeking place, instead of this present and accepting and open place that allows for everything to sort of exist as it is, and be fluid and sort of the anti-cage.
Okay. All right. I will have to check that out. That sounds pretty cool. So let's get into you. And I want to start, let's kind of start not at the beginning, but a little further along. So you are a veteran.
I
Um,
am.
so how did that happen? Where did you start? Where were you at? What have you seen?
Well, I'm only going to give you little teensy little nutshells of that because I
Of
did
course.
just finish writing a book about it, which I haven't even told you about that. Ha ha ha. That's the other
No,
thing
you
I'm
got.
doing
I mean,
this
I would
year.
have put that in your intro. I would have been like, she's got a book coming out.
Yeah, it's like I haven't really fully broken it out there into the internets yet because I'm still working on the the pre-publishing. I'm going to self-publish for
Okay.
creative control purposes, because I want
Okay.
to be able to have it be exactly the way that I fucking want it to be.
Sure.
And
Well, how far are you, like, totally the galleys are done, the editing's done, it's just figuring out how to get it to print?
it's pretty. I'm about to do the layout and design aspect.
Oh, wow.
I'm doing final line edits, and yeah, getting it out there. I've got preliminary cover art ready, and kind of yeah. So it's in the phase. It'll the plan is for it to be out on Veterans Day. So I'll be putting up a pre-order between in the next couple months probably.
Wow.
Yeah.
You are very busy. You are keeping busy. We have to, otherwise we'll go
Yeah.
nuts. I mean, sometimes people
That's
say that to me. They're like, "You're keeping busy." And I'm like, "Well, what's my alternative?"
mhm.
Like, what's my alternative?
Exactly.
I mean, for the past 2 years, and it's fun. I think we talked about this on your show, and I think I said, like, this exact same thing. So I guess I really am a predictable creature of habit. But it's like you can either dwell on all the things you can't do right now, or just try to focus on the stuff you can. And it's like
Yeah.
that's your choice, really.
Yeah. Well, because it's such for me a better feeling use of my energy than ruminating on anything that's going wrong. Um, it's there's so much that's going wrong all the time. I could
Yeah.
ruminate all day. I could focus on all the problems and all of the bad things that have happened in my life, or I could think of all of the interesting shit that I can make out of all of the insanity that I've already experienced. and and how to be present, it's like we're in the freaking apocalypse. Like
Mm,
we have
yeah.
this kind of gift of like stability, the myth of stability being exposed. It's like teehee, the man behind the curtain was always non-existent. So
So
now we get to sort of lean into that.
so where were you? Were you in Iraq?
I was in Iraq. Yes. So I joined. The nutshell was that I joined the army at age 19 out of Syracuse, New York. And I was recruited about 6 months after I had left this kind of insane reform school, which actually was just in the New York Times this week because a bunch of alumni brought child abuse lawsuits and won. So yeah, the Family
So
Foundation School was my
pardon my ignorance,
pre-military.
but what exactly, like, define reform school? Like I've heard that term around, but I don't know exactly what that refers to when you say, like, I went to a reform school. Like is that religious or is that
There's varying degrees of reform school, right? Like there's no
okay?
one cut in the cloth. I mean, there's like the kind that Paris Hilton has been exposing, which is, like the ones in Utah, and there's one in Jamaica, there's one in Samoa, I believe. But there are a shitload in the United States still, and they really are. They have no oversight. They're not state run usually. They're private institutions that have basically they use really inhumane and psychological abuse tactics to sort of scare kids straight. And it's this the quote unquote tough love thing, which is really just toughness. There's no love involved because these are people who are getting paid to change you. And so yeah, so I was in one that was founded by this guy, Tony Argyros, who was um, from New York City. My suspicion is he was hiding from some shady business dealings in upstate New York, very rural upstate New York, and he started taking in his kids' friends, um, who needed a place to stay and like kind of putting them to work on the family farm. And then over the years, it became a school with 250 students at the peak of it or so. And I was there about 20 years ago, from 99 to '01. And it was pretty institutionalized, but he kind of based it on the 12 steps of AA and also some like weird culty religious stuff and also just his own what I mean I think of all of them as at the very least like deeply narcissistic people, if not like sociopaths and psychopaths for the most part, because they were really using very unconventional tactics for they were using like POW tactics, like Korean POW tactics, to like get us to be good kids. So after that, in the
Can you
military,
can you give me? Do you feel comfortable giving an example? Like,
yeah, like they did a lot of like group shaming. Like, oh, The Handmaid's Tale, right? Like I think of The Handmaid's Tale as like the way the world would be if the guy who ran my reform school ran the world.
okay,
Um, it was they used a lot of it was very brothers keepery. Like when you got to the school, you were strip searched and like deloused by like other students.
how old? Other students?
Yes.
How old
So
were
it was
you?
all, I was 17 when I first got sent there, and there were kids there as young as like 13, 14
And
when
they
I
would
got there.
strip search you, and,
They stripped,
we're
yeah, that, I mean, that was like the first, that was like the chillest of the things. And then once they got into the real psychological stuff, it was based on like, they would stand you up in front of your peers and basically berate you for things.
how is
Whether it
that
was,
legal?
well, I mean, it wasn't really, but like there was
Mm.
no oversight. So like, and the town that they were working in was a very small town, a very poor, small rural town. And so they employed some of the townspeople, but they also just paid everybody, you know, the local sheriffs, like when kids would run away, like the first time I ran away, I was I made it all. I walked the 8 miles to town and got there like at the break of day, and the sheriff brought me back. I was like, damn
Oh
it.
my god!
Ugh.
So that was high school for you.
That was actually, well, interestingly, I already had a GED before I was sent there. My parents were a whole story. So they decided that I needed to be reformed. And so I had my GED before I went there because I had dropped out of school and I had planned to go do literally anything else other than high school. And
You didn't like high school?
oh my God, I was a nerd, and I was a whole mess even before. Like we could go. If you want to go all the way down the rabbit hole into how much of a weirdo I was, like I was homeschooled by Christians. I was very like James Dobson Christians, and I, went through a whole lot of. But I was also very inquisitive and rebellious because I was asking questions that I wasn't getting answers to, and so I was like, well, I'll just
Mm.
make my own rules, and that wasn't really working for the authority figures, and I think now as an adult I can say like the part of the harm that organized religion and specifically that type of Christianity does is it creates this very, very restrictive cage for your brain where
Yeah.
you can't ask certain questions, and when you do ask those questions it like really shakes your whole worldview from a very young age, and you realize that you can't fit and you don't fit and you don't know why, and so you freak out, and I think I was sort of in the freak out phase. But
When did you start asking those questions? Like, how young were you?
I don't know that I asked the theological questions until I was a teenager, but I know early on I remember just being more engaged and interested in the world than I was allowed to be. And
Hmm.
I was not allowed to read certain books. I was not allowed to watch certain movies. And so everything in my life became about what I was not allowed to do. And, I don't have any kids, but I think if I did, I would be really like, I would go with the complete opposite direction on like restrictions. I would just be like, look, you're allowed to do whatever you want. Like, be smart
Hmm.
about it. Because the thing is, once I started doing things, I was stupid.
Yeah, I mean, I my experience, I mean, one thing we do have in common is, we were raised with religion. And for me, like, I went to Catholic school.
Hmm.
And, so eventually I started questioning a lot of the dogma I was taught, where I'm like, this does not add up. And part of it was also, you know, I mean, even though like I was around a lot of that stuff at home, my parents were kind of what's the sort of like buffet Catholics, if that makes sense, where it's just like, my parents are academics, so it was like a relatively progressive upbringing. We always had gay
Mhm.
friends and stuff like that. So like I started asking, I'm just like, they tell us terrible things at school about gay people, and we have gay friends, and why do they say these terrible things? And my parents were always
Mhm.
like, well, we don't, we don't agree with that stuff because that stuff's wrong. We agree with the
Mhm.
whole love your neighbor part and charity, and we agree with that part. And I'm like, well, why are you on the team if you don't subscribe to everything? I mean, those were kind of the
Mhm.
questions that I had. And I think as I got older, I think the answer to that is kind of more of a generational thing. But yeah, I started really questioning things. And then for me, it was sort of like by the time I want to say like a sophomore, I kind
Mhm.
of thought, yeah, this stuff's wacky, but I'm going to put my
Mhm.
nose to the ground and I'm going to get through it because that's my ticket out of here.
Mhm.
Like that was sort of like my life. Just keep your note. Like I wasn't a bad kid or whatever. Like I was kind of, but anyway, yeah. So,
Yeah.
but back to you. So you
Hey, we're
had a
all the same person.
GED. So you were homeschooled and you were like, okay, I'm getting a GED because I just want to be done with this and I want to go. What did you want to do? Like, what did you think you were going to do? Were you doing music at that point?
I did not learn how to play music until like 10 years ago.
No
So
shit.
yeah, I learned
That's
to play
so
music after
cool.
the army. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah, no, it's been a really wonderful healing thing for me, music, because okay, so I wanted to be a writer. I didn't know I wanted to be a writer. Honestly, when I was young, I just wanted to go have experiences. And when I dropped out of school, and with my GED, I did intend to go to community college and just see what was going on. I had thought about interior design because that was what my best friend wanted to do, and I was like, that sounds cool. Anything was interesting. And my dad was he was the historian for a furniture company that was in the area, so he knew interior designers, and I was kind of thinking about that. But I was working, at the mall, at the cookie shop at the mall with a bunch of stoners, and
Were you into
and
pot at that point?
I became into pot. I surely
Okay.
did, and
I don't know
and
why
I
I
also
assumed with
became
that
into the
question.
gays. Yeah, no, I became into being queer. I did not know I was queer yet. I just knew I was definitely not like the way I was supposed to be. Um, like I was always getting in trouble, and I had a feeling it was just because of who I inherently was at that point because it was so constant. And so yeah, and then I met the people I was working with at the cookie shop. They were my first introduction to like the sort of queer community and like the idea of being bisexual, um, and it was right as I was like really hitting a lovely, sweet, comfortable spot of having found my people with them that my parents sent me away to this school without even telling me that I was going to be going. And so, and I was kind of disappeared from that. And so when
Was it
I,
because did you tell them that you were bisexual and they didn't handle it well, or what was the reason that they decided you needed to go to this reform school?
you'll have to ask them. We haven't talked in a long
Okay.
time, but I mean, honestly, I think that they decided that they told their friends all kinds of things that weren't true. This is not real. This is the first time I've actually talked about this, like on a show or anything, but it's, or really like that much. But they did, I don't know what their reasons were other than wanting to me to be a good Christian girl, trademark phrase there,
So you
and
weren't
I
Christian
wasn't.
enough. Okay.
Yeah, and interestingly, like when I got out of reform school, like I had sort of become really enamored with religion as or with the idea of like there being a higher power because it was like beaten into us and programmed into us at the school, but it was also like there has to be something that is making this all make sense somehow because it felt like madness and it was so traumatizing. And by the time I left, I was just like, all right, time to like dig into all of my inner reserves and just sort of like hope that there is some greater force that I'm tapping into here because like everyone around me is telling me I need to stay at this school, and be demeaned and all this horrible like punishment that isn't even making any sense to me. But I don't feel like I need to do that. I feel like I need to leave and go. And so I left. I walked. They had me picking up rocks and from a field and putting them in a bucket and bringing them over to another part of the field and dumping them out like all day long.
Was there a
And
purpose to this?
no, it was
Like,
to
was it
break
to?
me. The
It
purpose
was
was
just
to
to
break
break you.
me. Yeah.
Jesus.
And I was on, yeah, and they were doing all these things that I was not allowed to talk to anybody. It was called the shun sanction. Nobody was allowed to acknowledge my existence.
I mean,
And
this
yeah,
is a cult, basically. Like, you're
oh yeah, no,
describing a
it was
cult.
yeah. I mean, the New York Times did a really
Wow.
great rundown of it. So it was this really insane place, and
Well,
I
have they
was
been
being
shut
punished for
down?
now. It only like 5, 6 years ago, 2015, I think is when they shut down, because enough students like made a fuss. One of the former students went to Congress, and because it's a whole like there's a lot of really traumatized kids who came out of that school, and not all of them survived. The kid who went to Congress ultimately ended up killing himself.
Oh my God.
There's been a lot of suicides, a lot of overdoses, a lot of unnatural deaths. Like I feel like part of like I'm here partially, I think, because I knew it was nuts and I had to leave. Even though I had no money, no ID, I knew my parents were really going to hate me for essentially wasting all their money. And
And you haven't spoken to them since this.
no, we did have a relationship for almost 20 years, and then I found out some things that changed my thoughts of them.
Okay.
And during my divorce, things became clear. I was like, oh, maybe this is why I've married like two narcissistic, abusive people. And so all that with that, like the military on top of that was like, in some ways, it was like easier because it wasn't the same kind of psychological abuse. But in other ways, it was like actually life threatening.
So, did
So
you
then there was
join the
that.
military because you thought this is my way out of all this? I need to get away from
Hmm.
all this, and that's a ticket out. Okay. All right.
More or less, yeah. I mean, and that's exactly how the military markets it to everybody.
Yeah.
Nobody joins the military who has like a lot of better options.
Hmm.
Like, let's just be real. We know
Oh, of
that.
course. Yeah.
You
Like, yeah. Rich
know?
kids don't join the military, and
No.
yeah, it's they prey on poor people, and they prey on people who are in bad situations with the promise that they're gonna be able to better themselves.
Right. It's part of why now I do so much work with, as much as I can anyway, with talking to high school students who are being heavily recruited because, you know, when you're in a really vulnerable place, like I was in a very vulnerable place, already being eaten alive by freaking capitalism and the patriarchy, because that's literally what a reform school is. It's like the authoritarian, like the chiller authoritarian arm of capitalism and the patriarchy.
What do
And
you tell the kids now when you
yeah.
speak to them?
I tell them about my circumstances that led me to enlist, and I tell them about what I thought it was going to be, and then, compared to how it turned out to be. I talk to them about the ways that recruiters mislead them, the ways that recruiters will tell them exactly what they want to hear, and they won't overtly lie, but they won't say things like you're by the way, you're going to be getting paid like $2 an hour. The government owns you, and if you ever decide you want to quit this job, you're probably going to have to go through jail first. It's like
Wow.
the kinds of things that the recruiters are never going to say to teenagers. You know.
Have you been able to get through to some kids? Like, do you think there's some kids who maybe decided to take a different path after
I
listening
mean,
to you?
from some of the feedback I've gotten from teachers, yeah. I mean, at least it's made them think about it again. It's made them, ask questions and think, because I try to I don't want to beat kids over the head with anything. What I try to do is just give them real talk because nobody talks to kids like they're real people.
Hmm.
So I'm just like, look, I think y'all are worth more than $2 an hour. I think everyone in this country is. I don't think anyone should have to literally sell their body to the government. I tell them, it's like, look, you think of sex work as selling your body. Sex workers are renting their bodies. Like, you join the military and you're not only selling your body to the government, but also your mind and your soul. And you might never
Wow.
get them
That
back,
that that's
you
a
know?
that's a really interesting way to put it. I like that. I like that a lot. Wow. So, but what do you say in like a circumstance where well, first of all, I want to ask you, you brought up how it's just like no one talks to kids like they're just regular people. And
Hmm.
I agree with that 110%. And granted, I feel like I have a much more limited scope than you do, but I do have some experience. I did teach community college for a little while. Again, I had students of all ages, so not all of them were young people, but a lot of them were. And what I found, and I found this, and all the time I've spent in academia, like whether I was leading a classroom or was just part of it, when you raise that bar and you just treat them like humans, or just treat them like adults, maybe humans not the right, but you treat them like
Hmm.
adults, they often will just reach that bar.
Hmm. Oh,
Have you
yeah.
found that?
Yeah, totally. Like, maybe it comes from being a homeschool kid who spent a lot of time around adults when I was young, but like, I really like to just talk to kids about their ideas and hear from them. And I like to engage with them as people because, like, they don't have filters and they don't have preconceptions. And if they have a question, they'll fucking ask you. Like, if they think something you said is weird or dumb, they'll tell you. If they're not interested in something you said, they'll tell you. And I don't know, like, I find that it's so much more refreshing than being around people who are trying to tell me what they think I want to hear or try to like elicit a certain response from me, which is what freaking this entire adult world is. Like, I feel like being a kid is like being on acid a little bit. You're just kind of like, what's going on? That neat. Okay. And you jump into it.
So you join the military, they send you to Iraq, and then what? I mean, you don't have to go into all the details, obviously, but like, what are some kind of cliff notes you want to highlight there on? Okay, you spent your time in the military and you got out.
Well, I joined the military as because I wanted to be a journalist slash I wanted to be a writer, really. And so they gave me the job of a public affairs specialist, which is essentially a propagandist, but like an internal propagandist. My job was to create professional looking, newsy looking stories that were, entirely one sided, and shop it like to the soldiers, and who of which I was one. Basically, like, I called it like mixing the Kool-Aid and drinking it at the same time. And but of course, you can only drink so much of it before you become immune. So like, even all the conditioning, by the time I got to Iraq, I was also, I should say, I joined the military before the Iraq War started, so shortly after 9/11. So the Afghanistan War began right before I enlisted. I thought I was going to go to Afghanistan. While I was in training, is when the ramp up to the Iraq War began, and then it was just a couple months after I got to my unit that everybody else who had already been there deployed, and I stayed back until the second rotation. And so I went on the next two rotations to Baghdad. And so, because I was home in the States for about a year and a half before I went to Iraq for myself, I was able to sort of like hear all the critiques and read for myself and hear, like, listen to NPR because I was like, I fancied myself somewhat of a skeptic, even though I didn't fucking know shit, you know? And so I was like, I'll listen to NPR and I'll be a rebel and fucking wear patchouli. I used to like wear patchouli oil under my uniform to like piss off the brass. Just like, what smells like hippie in here? Like, it's me, your public affairs specialist. Let's go talk to the media. It's like, so it was also part of my job to like train the soldiers on what to say to the media. So like I would show up in my uniform, be like, this is what you say to these reporters here. Don't tell them, don't say anything this, don't say anything that, blah, blah, blah. So, like, this was how the news was being orchestrated here, how it was being manufactured here through the military, because the journalists were only allowed to really, they were only safely able to cover the conflict by embedding with a unit, unless they had their own security detail. And most of them couldn't really afford that. So it was like, or most of them just didn't do that. So they would embed with units, and our public affairs team would put them with units who had been coached. You know, they knew what to say. They had soldiers that were like, you know, ready to talk to the media, and you know, and so everything was as closely monitored as it could have been. So I like, by the time I got over there and I saw that we weren't liberating anybody, and that the quality of life in Iraq was shit, and that that could possibly have some reason to, something to do with why they were bombing us constantly. And we had created a power vacuum that we were filling with our own, you know, our own contractors and our own control. I was pretty disillusioned, you know, by the end of that first deployment. And then I was stop lost. The stop loss policy came into effect before I was able to get out. So I ended up
How
going
does that
in.
work exactly?
We called it the backdoor draft. It was basically the policy that the DoD came down with, saying that if you're already in the military, you can be extended until we decide you're
Okay.
done.
Okay.
And
So
they
that
called a
might
lot of people
be
back too.
sure. Well, I just remember, my memory of, the whole thing was I would be, I was in college when Iraq was really ramping up. And I saw on multiple occasions just friends of mine, classmates of
Hmm.
mine who signed up for the ROTC to do like a once a month thing to help pay for
Hmm.
college. Never thought they'd be anywhere near any type of combat. And all of a sudden they got a notice like, hey, we're sending you to Iraq,
Hmm.
and there was nothing they could do. They had to go because of the
Right.
agreement they made. They just had to go over there.
Right.
And around at this point, I mean, I had already kind of been reading Noam Chomsky at this point, so it was like so against the fact that we were over there and 100% against the war, and really asking a lot of questions about our system as a whole that I had not asked previously in high school. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so how did you like get out? Like when did you exit? Like what's the timeline there?
Yeah. So okay. So the stop loss policy came down in it was between, I think it was active between like '03 and '08. But so when it affected me, it was when I was part of the surge. This, do you remember the surge in '07?
Yeah.
It was like the whole like whatever, yeah. That was the thing that I was part of. With the 3rd Infantry Division, we were the main division that was sort of contributing like the bulk of the bodies for the war at that time. And so yeah, I the first time I was in Baghdad was from January '05 to January '06, and then the second time was March of '07 to May of '08. And then I got out 3 weeks after I got home, because as a result of the stop loss policy, they decided, the military in its infinite wisdom decided about, I think it was like 13 months into what they eventually told us was going to be a 15-month deployment. Because when we got there, they were like, it's a year to 18 months. We don't know. And so after a few months, they were like, it'll be 15 months. Okay. So 13 months in, the DoD directive comes down that there's going to be 2 days of stop, or 2 days of leave awarded for every month you were stop lost. So all the days added up, combined to the days I had already been saving. And I did the math and I was like, shit, if I don't get out now, I'm going to start my days of leave while I'm while I'm here, and that's not going to work. And so the military
Wow.
sent me home and basically out processed me and a bunch of others, you know, I wasn't alone, within like, you know, a week or three. And we went from being deployed to being civilians in less than a month.
And then you
And
found music.
well, then I traveled around a while, stumbled into a musician who I decided would be a great idea to marry, and I was like, you play music. Music is fun. I like singing. Will you teach me how to play this ukulele that you have? And he was like, yeah, sure. So he taught me a couple of chords, and I was like, I'm going to write my own songs on this. And I'd been listening to a lot of Kimya Dawson because the Juno soundtrack had come out while I was deployed. And I heard her lovely little song at the end of it, "Loose Lips,"
Yeah.
where she's like, "Fuck Bush and fuck this
Fuck
war,"
Bush
and
and
I was
fuck this
like,
book.
and I
It's
was like,
so
you can
funny
say
when
anything
she,
you want with a cute
yeah,
little instrument.
yeah. I love it too when she does that song live in recent, I mean, I guess by recent years, I mean like a little while ago at this point, but it's like she'll always stop it and she's like, I think maybe it's time to update this, but now that I think about it, still fuck Bush and still fuck this war and the next one.
Yeah,
Like
yeah. Bush has
I
had his
love
image
her.
way too revitalized. Like, we're like,
No
why is
kidding.
Bush's image rehabilitated? Why does he get like Bush and Michelle Obama
They're
together?
rehabilitating Cheney now.
I can't. I
They're
can't.
like,
I
I'm
can't.
like, are you
I
kidding?
can't. Like, I'm like, what? It wasn't long ago. It was. We
They're
have
war
like it,
criminals.
there was
Like,
YouTube then. Like we had like don't we remember? It was that I remember, and I smoked mad weed. If I can remember that, like it's horrifying. So yeah, like the idea that anybody thinks that Dick Cheney, oh my God. I like
it's
Dick
nuts. I
Cheney
mean,
is
it's
definitely not
absolutely
human,
nuts.
but
No, he is
they're all
evil.
part of the same evil machine,
Yep.
and that was the other thing is when I was deployed was when Obama was primarying, you know? The
Hmm.
primaries were happening in 2008, and I was like, Obama says he's going to end the Iraq war. Fucking yeah. So I was like, sure, hell yeah, let's go Obama. And then,
Hmm. So then when he
we
delivered on everything over the next
totally.
8 years,
I was
you were
like, yay,
thrilled.
Democrats.
You were
Yeah.
like, yeah, this guy rocks. He did everything. Everything he
Exactly.
said, he did it. What a
Like you know
guy.
what? If Obama had ended the Iraq War, I really think that I don't know. I think maybe my radical little brain would have taken a little longer to develop, but like, yeah, seeing that happen, I was just like, oh, they're all full of shit. Got it.
Hmm.
Got it. Not noted. And then I ended up meeting the other anti-war veterans at that very kind
Oh
of
man.
synchronistically through my now
And the plot
ex-husband's.
thickens.
Yeah.
I
Oh my
love
God,
this.
my
This is the,
the
I didn't know
long
we were
and
gonna
winding
cover. Yeah,
road
yeah, right. I didn't know we were
that
gonna go to all
leads.
these places, but
That's my
I'm just,
fucked up
yeah.
life.
You're like reform school, military, ukulele, anti-war activist. Like, yes, it's all coming together.
You should
This is
see the
why I
faces
do
my
this
therapist
show.
has for me.
So,
Yeah, it does. It all creates a very interesting circle because
so
yeah, go ahead.
So when did you really start? I mean, obviously, like you weren't really sold on this war even when you were there. You got home and you were just disappointed further. Um, so when did you get to the point where? I mean, first of all, let's talk about your own activism and specifically, we got to hear the details about you've had your run-ins with police, and in particular, I keep hearing about this. You got shot in the buttocks, I've heard.
I got shot in
So
the buttocks. Indeed. I was like, this is hilarious. Like it was funny even while it was painful. I was like, how the fuck? Really? Really? Fuck, really?
So what happened? Where was that?
It was in Portland. It was actually kind of my like initiation. I was like, I moved here in the middle of the pandemic. Kind of intuited my way here. I wasn't sure where I was going to move after Colorado. I just knew that I couldn't find the right spot there. And so I kind of ended up here first went out to Tulsa with Vets for Peace and a couple other vets and disrupted the Trump rally a little bit out there. Not anywhere near as much as the TikTokers did, but we did a little bit of disrupting. Um, and then came out to Oregon for a couple of random different reasons and felt like maybe I should live here. And so when I found my place immediately, I was like, all right, what's the first thing you do in a new city where there's massive demonstrations happening? You join
You
them.
get out there. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like you get your skin in the game in your new town. So and also it was like during the weekend of like the Wall of Vets thing, and so I was like, I'm a vet. I can get a white T-shirt and go down there.
Hmm.
So I went down and just wearing. Someone gave me a gas mask. Someone gave me a helmet, or no, I got a helmet. Someone gave me a gas mask and a some other stuff, some other gear that I needed, and yeah, and I went down there and I was like, all right, we're going to be the Wall of Vets. And so it was great. Everyone stood there for a hot minute. And then as soon as, like, I don't know, it was weird. Like, as soon as it actually started getting necessary for there to be a wall, people started dispersing. And then the tear gas came out and my gas mask worked fine. And so I stayed there for a while. And eventually, like, I saw people were dispersing. And I was like, well, I'm not going to, like, be a target right here in the front when there's people walking away. So I kind of went away to reassess for a second. And then when I circled back, I was standing kind of, there's the Justice Center there, the quote unquote, the Injustice Center there. And there was darkness under it, and there was the barricades. And I was standing not super close to where the crowd, I was kind of standing behind the group of people with the shields in the
Okay.
front. They were kneeling down, and I was in the back, and I had my hands on my hips, and I had the shirt that said Vets for Black Lives. And and I saw like a scope light, I saw, or what it looked like, a flashlight coming out. I was like,
So they were taking
flashlight?
aim at you.
Well, this was at first, and then I felt this like somebody had flicked me in the collarbone. I was like, this motherfucker just shot me. Like, and I like looked at him, and I was like, the fuck, the fuck, what? Like, I'm just standing here, like, I'm not even doing shit. And so that happened, and then there was more tear gas and more tear gas, and finally, like the agents start coming out and they start chasing people through, and I'm like, the fuck is this? They start chasing people, they start firing tear gas and firing rubber bullets, and I'm chasing people through, and I see people start running. I'm like, shit, I better fucking run. And so I start running, and as I'm running away, that's when I feel the rubber bullet in my ass, and I'm like, did this motherfucker just shoot me while I was running? Like, that
It
is
was the
not
same
rules of
guy.
engagement. I was
It
like,
was
that
the-
is not rules of engagement. I'm like, that's, what the fuck is this? This isn't even war. Like, this is bullshit. I was pissed. And, I was like, we're getting tear gas, we're getting shot at. I'm like, this is Portland. Fuck y'all. And I got so mad because I was like, this
Were you
is,
mad when your mayor had that like photo op? And he's like,
oh my
this is the. And
God.
you're like, I got shot in the collarbone and in the ass. It might have been the same guy.
Yeah, it was, yeah, it might have been. I mean, the thing that it really showed is that, the 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 liberals are only going to do as much as they feel like they need to do to save face. They're not actually going to do anything to save people. That's their thing. And so even the people's people, um, even the most liberal conservatives, even the most humane ones are still going to be saving face. Um, anyway, yeah, I was pretty. I mean, my eyes were opened. I don't want to say I was shocked because like you can't be shocked. Like if people are getting killed in the street, like of course I can get shot. I'm a white girl. Like I'm not if I can get shot by a rubber bullet, like if black people are getting shot with actual bullets, like of course I can get shot with a rubber bullet. No bigs. Um, like that shouldn't be shocking. The thing that was shocking to me was how everybody had sort of rolled with it and how everyone was adapting and how it was essentially a war zone. It was more of a combat zone than I had actually lived in my living support area,
Wow.
on the base. Like we had been getting bombed, but we weren't experiencing direct assaults. We weren't getting tear gassed every day, you know. And the thing is, Portland, of course, like we weren't doing anything illegal.
Hmm.
And that was
Well,
the
I
whole
mean,
thing.
that's been my experience too. In every protest I've been to, it's just especially with Black Lives Matter, it's always the cops that started. Like they're
Hmm.
dressed to the nines, they're militarized to the gill. When you get dressed for prom, you're gonna dance, and that's
Right.
exactly what happens every single time. I mean, every single protest I've been to, it's peaceful. Then the cops show up.
Right. Well, and they're waiting for anybody to quote unquote instigate, right? Like,
Hmm.
but the reality is like fucking people could throw all the Molotov cocktails they want. Like the cops have the ability to diffuse and deflect without becoming aggressors against people, without creating a fucking war in the streets, which is what was happening in Portland. They're coming out with all their gear and like I after it happened, when everyone regrouped, I walked back up and they're all in their line and their riot gear. And I'm like, what are y'all defending yourselves against? Like me? Like
Yeah.
I'm 125 pounds. Like I don't have any weapons. I was like, what are y'all afraid of? Like, y'all are little bitches.
Did they
Like,
answer you?
take off. Oh, no, no. I mean, I was just angry and screaming at that point. I was like, fully, like, I had just been shot. I was like pure adrenaline at that point.
Mhm.
I don't think you scream at cops that they're little bitches while they're pointing weapons at you unless you're pure adrenaline.
I understand. Understand. Yeah. That tracks.
but it was like the kind of thing where you could tell that they were not seeing me as a person.
Sure.
They weren't seeing any of us as people. Like it was stormtrooper ish. And that's why when anyone's like, oh, they're burning down Portland, I'm like, no, the cops are tear gassing
Yeah.
Portland. Like there's maybe one block where there's a dumpster fire, sometimes. But that's it. It's the cops. They're
Well,
terrorizing neighborhoods.
I'll never forget. I mean, and yeah, there are so many examples in so many cities. I mean, from Portland to Los Angeles and basically everywhere. I mean, you hear,
Hmm.
like they'll kettle protesters, they'll do this, they'll do that. But, when you mentioned Stormtrooper, that was like my initial reaction. And I'll never forget watching that freaking video. I mean, I wasn't there. I'm just watching the video. I can't imagine what it was like to actually be there. But watching the video where they had that string visual for Elijah McClain.
Hmm.
And just, I mean, I don't know if you saw that. Just the cops just marched in there and literally just started beating the shit out of people. And you hear people going like, "We're playing violins."
Yeah,
Like
I knew
it's like
people
we're.
there. I knew people playing there who were tear
You might have
gassed.
knew some of the because I
I
interviewed a
did.
couple of them on my show and yeah and
Yeah,
I
I knew a
was
couple
they're
of the
like we were
musicians.
just playing violin. They had a
Hmm.
permit to be there.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, and this is
It's
like the people
nuts.
that are normally not affected, right? The violinists are normally not out at the protests, right? Like they're normally like be doing what violinists do, practicing,
They have
And
practiced a lot. That's a tough
you
instrument.
know, it's hard. It's a hard instrument, and so when it's violinists out there saying like we have to make a stand for our fellow violinist and they're getting tear gassed for playing their instruments in memory of a person who was killed by the state, that we all what I was trying to tell people all last year, which they weren't interested in hearing even, and they're definitely not interested in hearing it now, is this is state violence that we're experiencing that's happening all the time, and we're all getting pushed further and further deeper into it until we've normalized it so much that like the violinists aren't talking about it anymore.
Mhm.
And it was not that long ago.
No, it really wasn't. So let's jump ahead a little bit to your new single, It's All Right to Not Be Okay. Is that a sentiment you feel a lot recently, especially? Is it all right to not be okay?
Yeah, I mean, it's been what I've been telling myself. It's been what I've been telling myself to yeah, so that I'm not putting too much pressure on myself to be okay. When
Hmm.
I'm like, I mean, we've just kind of taken a little journey down my path of like what the fuckness, and
Well, how do you
it,
feel now? Are you okay? Are you close to okay? Are you okay considering?
I mean, I think I'm varying degrees of okay at any given moment.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't think I'm okay a lot of the time. I think I function pretty well for not being okay, but I've normalized not okayness in my life. It's just sort of like what I do. And it's, yeah, so I had to kind of come to a place of um, acceptance with it. And when I went on my divorcecation to Europe right before, in 2019, before pandemic.
Where'd you go?
A few different places. I went to Brussels. I went to a few different places in Belgium and Paris, and then I went to stay with a couple of poet friends in Berlin for a few days.
I love
And
Berlin. That's one of
oh,
my. I think we talked about that on your guys' podcast. I
I think we
freaking
did.
love Berlin so much. Like
Oh my God, it was the
I
best.
will gush about that city like a ridiculous amount. It is funny. Like I have a friend who lives in Berlin, and he's out there because of because of family things. So it's like he's raising his kids there, and he kind of like I don't think whenever I go on my gush about Berlinness, he's kind of like, yeah, dude, I don't get to experience all that all the time, but I get it. You really like it, and you can come visit whenever you want.
Yeah, I loved it. I loved where I was, and it was just, I like languages, so it was fun to sort of listen and to experience that. And these poets I was staying with had their two young daughters who were absolutely lovely and precocious and adorable. And so they were, we were all kind of hanging out, and I was playing ukulele with them. And I can't remember exactly what the context was, but I think I said something about like, oh, I told the 16, like, oh, you don't need to get it perfect. And she's like, well, there's no such thing as perfect. And I was like, fuck you for knowing that already.
So
Like,
cool.
how did you get that cheat code already? Like, did you just pull that straight from the ether? Like, where did you get that from? Like, fucking yeah. But so because we're raised in this culture, this like capitalistic patriarchal culture that tells us that perfection is a thing we can achieve. And it's like, no, perfection doesn't exist. So like the idea of having to achieve it is basically just like being handed an exercise in futility. Like, here's your Sisyphean freaking boulder. Like, go and roll that up the hill forever instead of just having a good time and checking shit out and being interested, you know? and
Hmm.
so she's like, there's no such thing as perfect. And I was like, okay, fucking check that box. I know that now. I remember
And then
it.
did she throw you like another fastball? Like, did she go, oh, and by the way, in case you were wondering, Joy, there's no such thing as normal. And you're like, all right, I get it. You're a smart kid.
Well, and you know what? That was my extrapolation. I was like, oh, and there's also no such thing as normal. And that was the alternate line for in It's All Right to Not Be Okay. The
Uh-huh.
second line is there's no such thing as perfect anyway. And I almost wrote there's no such thing as normal. But I felt like there's no such thing as perfect needed its own, it just needed to be there because, yeah, there's also no such thing as normal. But
Yeah. Well,
but
it would
perfection
have
is
been a
part of it.
Smith's nod too, right? There's no such that's in
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
yeah, I forget which
What
song, but
song?
yeah, it's actually now I'm not it's either it might even actually be a Morrissey solo tune, which speaking of people who have gone nuts recently. But
Oh man.
but yeah,
Yeah.
it's either Morrissey or the Smiths. But it's one of those and
Boy.
it's still a great
Yeah, I
line, but
can't. Yeah, well, and it's like it's one of those things that's like, there's it's so simple that we forget how true it is, and um yeah, and these ideas, I was like, I need to not lose them. I need to really, really stay present with there being no such thing as perfect and no such thing as normal, and like with the idea that being okay is relative, just like
mhm.
you said. Yeah, I'm okay relative to a lot of ways I could be. A lot of people who've been through the things I've been through could would possibly be like, I don't know, like a quivering mass on the floor, like
How much
having a
has
complete
music helped
existential
you?
crisis. A
How much
lot.
has music helped you?
This much.
Bunches and bunches.
Bunches and bunches, exactly. Lots and lots. It's all the things. Music has helped me, meditation has helped me, writing has helped me, yoga has helped me, activism has helped, being around other people who've been through a lot of the same shit. Community is really what's up. You know, I would, I, I feel like, I can do a lot of things on my own, but without a community to give them to, I do feel like I'm just stumbling around in the void.
I like that. Yeah, that's a really cool story. That's still going. I can't wait for this book. We'll have to have you back on. I
Oh,
always get weird doing book interviews.
oh
I
yeah?
struggle. Well, here's why. Because you want people to go out and read the book, so you don't want to like spoil stuff per se, but I'll have so many questions I want to ask about the book. Because the only time I have an author on is if I like their book. I'm not going to be like, oh, I didn't like your book. Let me have you on the show. It's like I really liked your book. I want to talk about it, but I also don't want to like do a disservice to the work. And so I have a hard time interviewing authors, and maybe the interviews go fine and it's just me in my head, but I, like that's always the interview I will get most nervous about. Like I'll feel fine talking to you about your song because it's still like I'm not spoiling, people still got to go out and listen to the song. But it's like a book, it's like, well, if you just, it's just the words, so yeah, anyway, but that's just me. But
Yeah.
either way, um well, what all would you like to plug in closing?
What would I, well, I would love to. I mean, we've already plugged the shit out of the podcast. I will obviously drop the name What the Folk again because
Great
Sarah
podcast.
Baranowskis, yeah, Sarah and Sarah really saved a lot of my sanity by asking me if I wanted to do that podcast. I was just going to be ranting on the internet, probably for shits and giggles on my own, and that has been a really, for me, awesome constructive way to stay in touch with people doing great shit like you, and all of the people that we've had on, I feel like have taught me some incredible things
You
about
guys have
life
had some
and everything.
awesome guests. And the thing I love, because I was thinking about this like before we signed on, like it's not often where I will just like approach someone and be like, "Hey, I just really like your podcast. Would you like to have me on?" Like usually when I do other people's podcasts, it's like we've crossed paths online somehow, or like we have a mutual connect, or they had someone else on and they want to have me on, or whatever. But in this case, I found you guys, I think, when you just started. Like, I think I
Yeah,
was an
how
early
did you
listener.
find us?
I
Because
just
yeah,
found
it
you
really was
guys.
early. Sarah was like, "I got an email. Or we got an email for like our first. You were like one of our first emails. Like we had just set up the email account, and she's, we just got an email from Ron Placone, and he wants to be on our podcast." And I was like, "Okay, like that sounds fine. Like, is he sure? Like, I'm
Well,
still figuring out the editing. Like,
I found
yeah."
you online and I just loved the podcast. And I remember I was like, man, I really got to get through their whole catalog. And I don't even think I realized that you guys were a newer podcast because I listened to like 4 or 5 episodes and I didn't realize that I had
Ah.
listened to the entire discography. And I was just like, yeah, I'll probably listen to some more. And then I emailed, I guess Sarah got the email first.
Yeah.
And she told me, she's like, "Yeah, I saw you live in Denver." And I was like, "Oh, cool. Well, can I do your podcast?" And
Neat.
yeah,
Yeah.
I love doing your guys' podcast. It's a very cool show that I was a fan of before I did it and still am. And what I love most about what you guys do is it just seems like I'm just sitting at a coffee shop listening to a really cool conversation.
Aw.
I mean, that is because you talk to very interesting people, and it's like, if I know the guest, then it's, like, even cooler because it's like, well, these are all people whose work I already like, and they're collaborating, and that's great. But even if I don't know the guest, it's like, "Oh, I'm gonna learn something cool from this person." And, yeah, What the Folk, you guys, if you like, because
Oh.
you guys have everyone from, like, radical academics to other musicians. You've had other comedians too. I know I'm not the only
Hmm.
comic y'all have had. Really
Yeah.
fun show. Really fun show.
Yay.
And I love the title track too. I think that's you. But
That is me.
yeah, I love that song. That's
Thank
yeah.
you.
And I
It's
love the
also
new single too.
thank you. I honestly I think the podcast has also been a really fun um, avenue for me to release new music. Because I was sort of like, well, if I'm not playing gigs, because of various reasons, even before COVID, I want to be able to get music out, and I want to be able to have a reason to make good music, not just write songs and play them for myself, and then like forget them, you know. And yeah, it's been I've gotten to find so many other great musicians, and be challenged by them. So like I the new single, I'm very happy with it. I recorded it and one other single yet to be released, um, that last summer in San Francisco, at Hyde Street Studios, which I was very excited about because Cake recorded there and Tupac and like all Willie Nelson. Like I recorded in
Nice.
the same studio where Willie Nelson recorded and I Can Die Happy, basically.
There you go. That's awesome.
um, but you know, but it was also like just with this incredible group of women that I recorded these songs. And so that was a very cathartic process. Um, so yeah, I'm really happy to promote that. It features my boxing trainer. The new video, the new video for the song. I jump into the ring for fakesies, but actually this summer I'm gonna do my first for realsies fight. I'm starting to train this week. I'm very excited.
Nice.
So yeah,
Well, good luck. I
yeah,
think you'll
new
be
songs.
yeah, you'll be like I could box. I got shot in the ass. I'm ready to box now. I got this.
Why not? Actually, what I realized is when I was running from the freaking fascists in the street is I need to get in shape. And so I joined a gym and now I'm getting in shape, and yeah, by this summer I'll hopefully be really in shape enough to not get my whole ass kicked.
So remind everyone again. So obviously you can find What the Folk wherever you get your podcast. Where should people go specifically to find your music? The single is on YouTube. Just Joy Damiani on YouTube, and you have
Hmm.
a Bandcamp as well, right? Give people the URL for that.
Yes, joydamiani.bandcamp.com. Damiani is how you spell Damiani. And let's see. So joydamiani.com has pretty much everything, all the things. There's all the old music, the new music, um, links to videos, links to follow me on all of the socials, at Joy Damiani Music on all the socials, except for Twitter, where I am at Try Not to Be a Dick, which was
I
the
love
name
your
of the
Twitter
first
handle.
song I wrote.
Yeah. Try
That was the
not to
first
be a
song I
dick.
wrote, or the second song I wrote, and that was how I knew I was going to have to be a musician because I wanted people to sing it with me.
I feel like those really go together too. It's all right to not be okay. Try not to be a dick.
Right,
Like
they're
that's
companion pieces. They're salt and
important
pepper.
life lessons. Yeah,
They should
totally.
stay married.
I agree. Well, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for
Oh.
sharing your story. And yeah, we'll have to have you back on once the book comes out and I read it and I try to ask the right questions.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I just really enjoyed talking with you. This has been a lovely way to spend my Tuesday.
Cheers. Back at you. Be well, Joy. Peace.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Joy Demiani. Check it out, joydemiani.bandcamp.com, and you can find the music video on her YouTube page, which is just her name again, Joy Demiani. And yeah, there we go. That was the interviews portion of this week's Get Your News On with Ron. We'll be back for headlines on Thursday. So that's Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. And Savage Joy actually joins me. This is the week of joy over here on Get Your News On with Ron. Tour dates, I got them. April, I'm heading out. Well, first of all, LA, we got a local show February 10th. There should be some really cool guests on that. I'll be announcing more soon. But February 10th, Los Angeles. Get your tickets now, ronplacone.com. April, Northeast in Canada. I'm coming for you, and I'm calling the tour Poutine, Not Pipelines. I kind of like that title. So I like to say it as much as I can. And I only got a couple more months to say it. But where all am I going? I'm going to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, my hometown. Can't wait to see you. Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, Burlington, Vermont, Portland, Maine, Boston, Mass, New York City, baby. Chris Moen's going to be opening those states, and Lauren Ashcraft is going to be opening in Pittsburgh and New York as well. Get your tickets, ronplacone.com. Don't wait. Can't wait to see you out there. And folks, patreon.com/Ron Placone. Valentine's Day is coming up. A personalized theme song makes a great Valentine's Day gift or a birthday gift. You need to get birthday gifts for people, don't you? I made my first birthday theme about a week ago. Makes a great gift for a give what you can level. Give what you can. Even $1 a month goes a long way. Patreon.com/Ron Placone. Guys, I'll be back on Thursday. Check out Joy's music because she's awesome. Again, that's Joy Damiani, joydamiani.com for all those links and the What the Folk podcast, which I think Sarah's in the chat right now. What's up, Sarah? Sarah is here. Sarah and Joy, they do an excellent podcast. It's a lot of fun. I had a blast doing it, and they do a really cool thing there. Guys, we'll be back on Thursday. And in the meantime, you know the drill. Lucy, she says meow, and I say peace, love, and a general strike. See you next time.